How to Stop Doubting Yourself. The Stoic Secret to Unshakable Confidence. The voice in your head that keeps you up at night, the one that whispers you are not ready, you are not enough, you are going to fail. That voice is not your enemy. It only feels that way. Here is the paradox almost no one tells you. The people history remembers as unshakable were not born without doubt. They were not immune to fear. Some of them had less reason to believe in themselves than you do right now. Less status, less freedom, less control over their own bodies. And yet they became certain. Not loud, not arrogant, certain. So what did they know that you do not? We live in an age obsessed with confidence. Podcasts sell it. Self-help books promise it in 10 easy steps. And still, millions of capable people lie awake each night, replaying old failures, rehearsing conversations they are afraid to have, waiting to feel ready before they act. But readiness was never the missing ingredient. Something else is. 2,000 years ago, a man who owned nothing, not his name, not his body, not even the right to walk away, built a mind so steady that free men traveled hundreds of miles just to sit at his feet and learn how he did it. He was a slave, and he became one of the most confident men in the ancient world. Tonight, we are going to find out how. Notice something about that fear you carry. It rarely shows up as a single clear thought. It shows up as a feeling in the chest before you hit send. A tightness in the jaw before you speak in a room full of people who seem more certain than you. We tend to treat that hesitation as evidence, as if the doubt itself proved we are not ready, not capable, not the kind of person who gets to feel sure. But doubt was never designed to be evidence of anything. It is simply the oldest alarm system the human mind has, still firing today at emails and eye contact. The people who look unshaken were not born with a quieter alarm. They learned something about what to do when it rings. In the 1st century after Christ, in the Phrygian town of Hierapolis, a boy was born into slavery. We do not know his birth name. History remembers him only by the name given to him later, Epictetus, which in Greek means simply acquired. Property. A thing that is owned. At some point in his early years, he was taken to Rome and became the property of Epictetus, a wealthy freedman who served as secretary to the Emperor Nero. This was not a gentle household. Epictetus moved in the highest circles of imperial power, and his slaves existed entirely at his discretion. Bodies to be used, disciplined, or discarded as he saw fit. According to accounts passed down by later writers, including the philosopher Origen, Epictetus's leg was permanently damaged during his years in slavery. Some versions of the story claim it happened at his master's hand. We cannot say with certainty exactly how it occurred, or verify the details of the exchange sometimes attributed to that moment. What we can say with confidence is this. Epictetus lived the rest of his life with a lasting physical injury, walking with a limp, in a society that measured a man's worth by his body's usefulness to someone else. Picture what that meant. No control over his own movement through the world. No control over who touched him, who spoke to him, who decided his fate. A body that did not fully obey him, owned by a man who did not have to answer to him. If there was ever a life engineered to produce permanent, justified self-doubt, this was it. And yet, something extraordinary happened inside that house. Somehow, whether through his master's patronage or his own persistence, the enslaved boy was permitted to study under Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected Stoic teachers in Rome. Rufus did not soften philosophy into comfort. He taught that a person's worth has nothing to do with their circumstances, and everything to do with the quality of their judgments, their choices, their character. Wealth, status, even the body itself. These were, in Stoic terms, indifferents. Not because they do not matter at all, but because they are not what makes a person good, and they are not what should determine a person's sense of self. Imagine hearing that teaching as a slave. Imagine being told, in a room full of men who were legally free while you were not, that your legal status changes nothing about your actual worth. Because worth was never something anyone else had the power to assign or remove in the first place. Consider what his daily reality still looked like even as he absorbed this teaching. He would have left Rufus's lectures and returned to a household where he was still, by law, an object. Still subject to being sold, reassigned, struck, or ignored entirely at another man's discretion. Still walking with the same permanent injury, on the same uneven Roman streets, past citizens who would never have to think twice about their own right to exist as they pleased. Philosophy did not change a single one of those external facts. What it changed was where he located himself inside them. Whether he understood his mind to be a possession of his master's, or the one thing in the entire arrangement that remained entirely, irreducibly his own. Something in that idea took root in him permanently. Eventually, Epictetus gained his freedom. Historical sources do not preserve the exact circumstances of his manumission, so we will not invent them. Only that by adulthood he was a free man, and he began teaching philosophy in Rome himself. Then, in the year 93 CE, the Emperor Domitian issued an edict banishing all philosophers from the city, suspicious that their teachings bred independence of mind that threatened imperial authority. Epictetus, a man who had already lost his freedom once and rebuilt his life from nothing, lost his position in Rome and was forced out entirely. He crossed into Greece and settled in Nicopolis, a city on the northwestern coast. And there, with nothing but his reputation and his mind, he built a school from the ground up. He owned almost nothing for the rest of his life. Ancient sources describe him living with extreme simplicity. A small house, a rush mat, an earthenware lamp after his iron one was reportedly stolen. He never married, choosing instead to devote himself fully to teaching. And according to accounts from his students, in his later years he took in and helped raise a friend's child who would have otherwise been abandoned. Picture the contrast this presented to everyone who walked through his door. Nicopolis was a working port city, its harbor loud with merchants, its streets full of men constantly calculating their own status. How much land they held. How many clients owed them favors. How close they sat to power. Into that noise came a teacher who owned almost nothing, sat on the same simple mat as his poorest student, and spoke with an authority that had nothing to do with any of it. For the men accustomed to measuring themselves by what they possessed, it must have been genuinely disorienting to encounter someone whose steadiness did not move an inch regardless of what he had or lacked. And they came. Not because they had to. Free men, Roman citizens, sons of senators, men with everything Epictetus had once been denied, traveled great distances to sit on hard benches in a small Greek town and listen to a former slave with a limp explain what real strength actually was. We know his teachings today largely through one of those students, Arian, who transcribed them into what became the Discourses and the Enchiridion. Within those pages sits the idea he built his entire life around, expressed in his own surviving words: some things are within our power while others are not. Our judgments are up to us. Our desires are up to us. Our responses are up to us. Our bodies, our reputations, our circumstances, the opinions others hold of us. These are not up to us no matter how much we obsess over them. A man who had lost every external form of control, his freedom, his body's full function, his very legal personhood, had discovered the one form of control no one could take from him. And that is the only control that matters. Here is what almost everyone misunderstands about confidence. We treat it like a feeling we are waiting to arrive. We think certainty comes first and then action follows. That we need to feel ready before we speak up in the meeting, launch the business, ask for the raise, or end the relationship that no longer serves us. So we wait. We prepare. We wait some more. And the feeling of readiness never quite arrives because we were looking for it in the wrong place. Epictetus never waited to feel confident. He built something sturdier than a feeling. He built a framework. And the framework was brutally simple. Stop measuring your worth by things you do not control and start measuring it entirely by things you do. Modern psychology has, in its own language, arrived at nearly the same conclusion Epictetus reached 2,000 years ago. Researchers describe something called locus of control. That is the degree to which a person believes outcomes in their life are determined by their own actions versus by external forces. People with a strongly external locus of control tend to report higher anxiety, more helplessness, and critically, more chronic self-doubt. Why would they not? If your sense of worth depends on your boss's approval, the market's mood, a stranger's opinion, or an outcome you cannot fully engineer, then of course you feel shaky. You have built your identity on ground that was never yours to stand on. Self-doubt in this light is not a character flaw. It is often just a symptom of measuring yourself by the wrong ruler. Think about what actually produced Epictetus' steadiness. It was not the absence of hardship. He had more hardship stacked against him than almost anyone we study in this era. It was not privilege or talent alone or luck. It was a decision, made and remade daily, to locate his sense of self entirely inside the boundary of what he actually controlled. His judgments, his effort, his integrity, his response to what happened to him. Everything outside that boundary, his master's cruelty, the emperor's edict, other people's opinions of a limping former slave, he treated as weather. Real, sometimes painful, but never a verdict on his worth. This is the actual mechanism behind unshakable confidence, and it has almost nothing to do with self-esteem in the way we usually talk about it. It is not believing in yourself as some vague, decorative affirmation. It is narrowing your self-evaluation down to a domain small enough that you can actually be excellent in it. Your effort, your honesty, your discipline, your judgment in this moment, and refusing to let anything outside that domain cast a verdict on who you are. When you tie your confidence to outcomes, will they like me? Will this succeed? Will I be enough? You are, by definition, tying your identity to something you cannot fully control. You will always be one bad outcome away from doubting yourself again. But when you tie your confidence to your conduct, did I act with integrity? Did I do the work? Did I respond the way the person I want to be would respond? You become almost impossible to shake. Because that standard is always entirely within reach. That is what Epictetus discovered in chains, and what free men later crossed the sea to learn from him. Not a trick, not a mindset hack. A relocation of identity, from the parts of life that were never yours to control, to the one part that always was. Confidence built this way is not a feeling you summon. It is a discipline you practice. Here is exactly how to start. First, the dichotomy of control audit. Each time you feel a wave of self-doubt rising before a presentation, before sending a message you are nervous about, before a decision you keep circling, stop and take out a page. Draw one line down the middle. On the left, write every element of the situation that is not actually up to you. How the other person reacts. Whether the market shifts in your favor. What people will think. Whether you succeed on the first attempt. On the right, write everything that is entirely up to you. How thoroughly you prepared. How honestly you communicated. Whether you showed up on time. Whether your effort matched your standards. Then deliberately cross out the left column. Not to pretend those things do not exist. They do and they matter. But to remind your nervous system in writing that your worth was never assigned to that column in the first place. Your job was only ever the right side of the page. Do this before any moment that triggers doubt consistently for several weeks. You are not trying to talk yourself into feeling brave. You are retraining where your mind automatically looks first when it searches for evidence of your worth. Over time, the retraining becomes reflex. You stop consulting the left column altogether. Take a concrete example. Say you are about to pitch an idea to a room that intimidates you. The left column holds things like whether they will approve the budget, whether a rival idea gets chosen instead, whether the loudest person in the room decides to challenge you. None of that is yours to command, no matter how well you prepare. The right column holds whether you research the material thoroughly, whether you rehearse the delivery, whether you speak honestly about the idea's limitations instead of overselling it. Walk into that room having already won on every measure that was actually yours to win. What happens after that is weather. Second, the view from above. Marcus Aurelius, who studied and deeply admired Epictetus's teaching, practiced a mental exercise later scholars have called the view from above. Imagining oneself rising above the immediate scene, seeing the situation as if from a great height, shrinking the moment down to its true size against the scale of the world, of time, of every other human life being lived at that same instant. Use this before any moment your self-doubt feels enormous. Close your eyes. Picture yourself lifting away from the room you are in. Through the ceiling, above the building, above the city, higher still, until you can see the curve of the horizon. From that height, watch the meeting you are dreading, the conversation you are avoiding, the mistake you are replaying, shrink to the size of a single point of light among millions of others happening at the same moment across the world. This is not meant to make your problem feel unimportant in a dismissive way. It is meant to restore proportion. Self-doubt thrives on magnification. It convinces you that this one moment defines your entire worth. The view from above breaks that illusion by putting the moment back where it actually belongs. Significant to you, but not a referendum on who you are. Third, examine the judgment, not the event. One of Epictetus's most repeated ideas, preserved in the opening lines of the Enchiridion, is that people are disturbed not by events themselves, but by their judgments about those events. Self-doubt almost never comes from what actually happened. It comes from the interpretation layered on top of it. Practice catching the interpretation in real time. When doubt hits, after a mistake, a rejection, a moment of visible failure, ask yourself directly, what is the bare fact here stripped of story? Usually the fact is small. I made an error in the report, or they did not respond to my message. Then notice the judgment your mind immediately stacked on top of it. I am not good enough. I will always fail. Everyone saw. Say the judgment out loud, separately from the fact, and ask whether it is actually true or just familiar. This single habit, separating the event from the story you are telling about the event, is often enough to dissolve the majority of everyday self-doubt. Because most of it was never coming from reality. It was coming from an unexamined interpretation you had been rehearsing for years. Fourth, the discipline of kept promises. Confidence is not built through big dramatic wins. It is built the same way trust is built between two people, through small, repeated, kept promises. Every time you tell yourself you will do something and then do not, you teach your own mind that your word is unreliable. Every time you keep a small commitment to yourself, you build evidence, brick by brick, that you are someone whose word can be trusted, including by yourself. Start absurdly small. Choose one commitment each day that takes less than 15 minutes, and treat it as non-negotiable. Not because the task itself matters, but because keeping the promise does. A short walk. 10 minutes of reading. Writing one paragraph. The content is irrelevant. What matters is that you said you would, and then you did. Over weeks, this compounds into something far more durable than a motivational high. It becomes a track record. And unlike the approval of others, a track record of kept promises to yourself is entirely within your control to build, one small, unglamorous commitment at a time. Notice what makes this different from the confidence through achievement most people chase. Achievement depends on the outside world cooperating. The market, the audience, the interview panel, the timing. A kept promise to yourself depends on nothing but you. That is precisely why it works as a foundation while outcome chasing does not. You are not waiting for the world's approval to arrive before you are allowed to trust yourself. You are generating the evidence directly, on your own terms, every single day. Epictetus never stopped walking with a limp. He never regained the years taken from him in slavery. He never controlled whether an emperor would banish him from the only home he had built. And still, he became one of the steadiest minds the ancient world ever produced. Not despite what was taken from him, but because he stopped looking for his worth in what could be taken at all. Your self-doubt is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is only proof that some part of your identity has been resting on ground you never actually owned. An outcome, an opinion, a version of the future you cannot guarantee. Move that identity onto the only ground that was ever truly yours. Your effort, your integrity, your judgment, your next right action. And the doubt loses its foundation. Not all at once, but steadily. The way a limp becomes simply the way a man walks and stops being the story of who he is. You do not need to feel ready. You only need to act from the part of yourself no one can touch. Consider, one more time, the shape of that life in Nicopolis. A man with no wealth, no family name, no political standing, teaching from a rush mat in a small room by the sea. And yet the most powerful men of his age crossed mountains to learn from him what real steadiness actually required. Not because he had more than they did. Because he had located his worth somewhere none of them had thought to look. Somewhere their armies and their titles and their fortunes had no jurisdiction at all. That location is still available to you right now in whatever room you are sitting in. If this brought you a little more clarity today, subscribe because the next lesson we uncover might be the one you need most. The old philosophers already found the way through this. We are just here to remind you.